Hello everyone. September 13, 2024. My name is Bishoy, and today we are going to continue our previous discussion on capacity, content, competence, and consent, and then we are going to start our new discussion on research ethics. Okay, so first things first, language and use of interpreter. So always on the answers of board exams, you have to choose an interpreter. Even if there is like multilingual relatives or you're able to speak like two or three language, you should always use the interpreter. It will be always the right answer. And it is very common question in the USMLE exams, okay? So first thing you are going to discuss health decisions with the patients in terms they can relate to. Like you are not going to tell them like you have squamous cell carcinoma and this is a subtype of two common cancers. You have a tumor, you have a cancer or whatever. You need to avoid jargon, individualize and relate to the patient, like speak at their own level. And then you are going to communicate in a language that the patient understands. The patient cannot provide informed consent if they are unable to comprehend their briefing due to language barriers. So always make sure that the patient is understanding you. And we already discussed this last time when we were talking about informed consent. So understanding is a very important thing, and you need to request an interpreter. This is very important, and it will always be the answer. Request an interpreter if you are unable to communicate with the patient in a language in which you have a comprehensive discussion and assess the patient understanding of the relevant information. If my native language is Arabic and the patient is speaking Arabic, it's okay. It is our native or mother tongue language. But if I speak English and Arabic and the patient is like speaking Spanish and I know some Spanish, even if I'm fluent at Spanish, I need to request an interpreter. Both in person and remote, phone and video interpreted services are appropriate. If they are telling you in the question that no interpreter is available, you are going to use a remote service like a phone or video interpreter. Communicating without an interpreter can result in patients unknowingly consenting to unwanted procedures, misunderstanding their diagnosis, and or complying poorly with the medical advice. Like imagine if you are in a restaurant, like a Chinese restaurant, and you don't know what they are telling you, and okay, I want this. You don't want to feel embarrassed, right? And multilingual relatives, as I said, are not acceptable alternatives to professional interpreters. Okay, so I don't want to spend long time on this. The most important thing is use an interpreter as much as you can. Parental consent for minors. Okay, as we talked last time, that exceptions to requirements of parental consent when it is emergency or life-saving interventions like severe trauma or suicidal ideation or blood transfusion for life-threatening hemorrhage. Okay, so the minor is legally emancipated, but if I am in emergency or life-threatening condition, I need to treat the patient right now, even if their parents reject it. Like if we have an example of Jehovah's Witnesses and the patient is like had a motor vehicle accident and their parents did not want the patient to receive blood transfusion. So your answer should be is to give blood transfusion because this is an emergency. Okay, so Jehovah's Witnesses or parental consent is needed for non-emergency situations. Okay, care regarding sex, contraceptions, STI, or pregnancy are accepted for abortion in most states, and this is the answer for most of the USMLE exams. So if like a 13-year-old boy comes to the emergency department and they are having like STI or sexual transmitted infection and they don't want their parents to know, so the answer do not tell their parents, okay? For addiction cares or minors who are parents themselves or who are married or financially dependent or in the military services. Those are exceptions for the minor consent, like parental consent, okay? Refusal to consent. Generally, parents and legal guardians may refuse any treatment for a minor under their care in non-life-threatening condition. A parent cannot refuse an emergency life-saving intervention for minor for any reason, either it is religious or socially or anything. They don't have the right to refuse emergency life-saving intervention for their kids. Okay? This refusal is only acceptable if the decision does not pose a risk or serious harm to the minor or even the population. Like if a patient is having like common cold and their parents do not want the patient to get treated. Okay, you need a consent for this and it is not a big deal. It's just a common cold and it's going to go on its own. But if it is blood transfusion or mechanical intubation or something that is life-saving, this is not acceptable. Legal interventions like court order may be necessary to mandate treatment for non-emergency but fatal medical condition against the parents or legal guardian's refusal to consent. Okay, so the sequence of your next steps on the question is first, if the patient is like having TB and their parents rejected to treat him, the story is not over. You have to convince them, explore why they don't want their kids to be treated because these drugs is gonna cause autism. No, it is not going to cause autism, and you're gonna explain to them. And your last step is because treating tuberculosis is something very important, is to seek a court order. Okay, but this is the last resort. Do not like pick this option frequently on the MCQs. Physicians should always attempt to address concerns motivating the refusal of treatment, like misunderstanding of the procedure or fear of potential side effects. So you should always attempt to address these concerns first. Physicians should also respect the religious beliefs and the cultural values of the patient that may affect the treatment and make therapeutic decision accordingly with the legal scope of what treatment may be refused. For example, a Jehovah's Witness can refuse blood transfusion for their child in a non-life-threatening situation, but not in a life-threatening situation. The examples that I already explained before. Parents are legally permitted to refuse vaccination for their children, but you should try with them first. In rare cases, it may be appropriate to overrule a parental decision to decline immunization, like in emergency, such a child with a contaminated puncture wound and sign of life-threatening tetanus infection. So this is not like a vaccine for prevention only, but this is kind of like a treatment. Okay, they may deny subsequent immunization, but the risk to die now if they didn't take this vaccination from a contaminated puncture wound is almost 100. Efforts should be made to understand the parents' refusal to vaccinate their children and, where possible, to help understand the advantages of vaccination. Okay, a quick overview here for parental consent of minors. Minors are considered legally incompetent. Parental consent is generally required for minors to receive medical care, and the exceptions we already discussed. Although not legally mandatory, it is recommendable that physicians obtain the minor's approval for medical care. This is just to establish a patient relationship. You have to talk with the minor and tell them we're gonna do one, two, three. It is not something legally, but it is required for the relationship between the physician and the patient. For children participating in medical research, and I'm going to talk on this in a minute, documented consent must be obtained from parents or guardians, and assent must be obtained from minors. This is very important. You cannot enroll children in research without taking a parental consent. If the parents of the patients are themselves minors, grandparents may give consent for their grandchildren. For minors who have been removed from their parental care and whose parents' right to consent has been revoked by a juvenile court, the court must assign a guardian, like a grandparent who can provide a consent. So the take-home message is that consent is required, but not mandatory. Okay. In the absence of another guardian, you need to contact the CPS, Child Protective Services. Child Protective Services will usually be the answer on a child abuse, and when there is no parent to give a consent or another guardian or alternative. Okay. When they have had their parents' rights terminated. Okay. Let's move to our next discussion on research. So here for research ethics, first thing is the role of institutional review boards. What is the institutional review boards or the IRB? This is a committee that reviews designs of studies involving humans to ensure participant safety, participant confidentiality, and compliance with medical ethics. Always research studies should be conducted in an ethical manner. And who accepts or declines these studies, something called the Institutional Review Board or the IRB. So when you wanted to conduct a research in your own hospital or whenever country, you have to get first an approval of the Institutional Review Board. What is the composition of an institutional review board? The composition can vary across institution, but should include at least five members with at least one scientist and one non-scientist. Okay, not very important to know the composition, but very important to know that you have to get acceptance from the IRB before conducting your research. Okay, not only to get acceptance at first, but for any edits, you have to get acceptance. You can look to it like a Facebook post. When you post a Facebook post and you need acceptance from the group admin, if you made an edit, the admin still have to review it again before it can be published. So same concept here applies to your research. Okay. Institutional review boards that review studies conducted on vulnerable population. Who are the vulnerable populations? They are like infants or anyone who cannot take care of themselves or make a decision. Okay, should include representatives of the corresponding population. Like a minor, I need to take a consent of their parents, for example. So what is the IRB approval? For most forms of primary research involving human subjects, IRB should review and approve the study proposal and informed consent protocols before research activity is even started. Any amendment or any edit to an approved research protocol must be re-evaluated and re-approved by the IRB before the research activity can continue. So not only at the start, but any edits, you need to get an acceptance or re-evaluation and approval from the IRB before continuation. Examples of studies that do not require IRB review and approval include surveys or interviews about products or policies, educational tests, and secondary research, like publicly available non-identifiable information. For example, systematic review and meta-analysis that we can conduct at home. I do not need to get an acceptance from the institutional review board because I'm merely not conducting a research on a human subject. I'm just gathering data online and combining them together and making some statistical tests. Okay, let's move on for informed consent for research. So before I start on this, you have to look for it like an informed consent for any medical procedure. Researchers performing a study involving an intervention on or interaction with human subjects should obtain informed consent from potential participants or their parents if they are kids and stuff like this. You and the same steps that you did with any medical informed consent you're gonna conduct on research. For example, you're gonna explain everything related to your study and you have to get the acceptance. But it is not that simple as it sounds. There is some details inside that we are going to explain now. The process of obtaining informed consent is initiated by performing the following steps with potential participants. You need to provide sufficient information in verbally and in writing as a part of informed consent for research form. Like they need to sign these papers. Okay. All aspects of experimental protocol. So the trial design, the purpose and duration of research. We are conducting a study to evaluate which drug is better, or we are having like a new treatment for your type of cancer, and it is gonna take us like 1 year and the purpose is if this treatment is proved to be efficient, we're gonna publish it to the market. And we already did 1, 2, 3, and the side effects may be 1, 2, 3, and so on and so forth. Any foreseeable hazards to the participant. This drug like may increase bleeding, so you may be amenable to get a subarachnoid hemorrhage, intraarachnoid hemorrhage, or any bleeding. It may decrease your platelet count, We need to follow up. The risk is like that. The likelihood of direct benefit to the participant, that this drug may cure your disease and may not. All alternative treatment options, if applicable. This is the standard treatment for tuberculosis, for example, and we got a new antibiotic that we want to test. Details about the funding and financial incentives for the research, and this is always should be disclosed, not for potential participants only, but for everyone. When you give like a talk, if you are having a fund or financial incentive, you have to disclose this information. A statement about the confidentiality of collected information and how records identifying the subject will be maintained. Okay. And the most important in this sentence is how records identifying the subject. If the record is not identifying the subject, I can use it. Okay. And I will explain it when it comes. For research involving more than minimal risk, the minimal risk is like GI upset. This is a common side effect of many drugs. So this is not a big deal. Information on whether any compensation or medical treatments are available in case of injury. Okay, this drug may cause 1 to 3, and if that happened, I am responsible to treat you, and I may give you a compensation. Okay. Information on whom to contact regarding questions about the trial or participant rights. This is the contact person, Mr. X, and you can call him if you have any questions or you wanted to withdraw. Yes, they have the right to withdraw from the study at any given time. A statement is that participation is voluntary at all times. Everything is voluntary, and the participant can withdraw at any time without penalty, loss of benefits, or any harm may happen to the patient. It is okay to leave at any time. Okay, or obligation to explain the decision. If you want to leave now, you can leave, no question asked. Facilitate potential participant understanding and provided information and clarify potential misunderstanding. You have to make sure that everything is clear, and for sure, make sure that the patient have decision-making capacity. Therapeutic misconception: an individual participating in research believes that they are receiving individualized medical treatment or care rather than participating in research. Okay, you are not only here to receive treatment, you are participating in research, and you need like to explain everything as we said. Therapeutic misestimation, and this is when an individual misjudges the risk or benefit participating in the research. Like they wanted to participate in this research because they were told that this is a cure for their cancer. No, this is not wrong. This is wrong. This is not a cure for your cancer. This is just a trial. Okay. Provide adequate time and opportunity for potential participants to decide whether or not to participate. Okay, now you have known everything. You can come to me at any time and ask to participate. Minimize the possibility of coercion or under influence. Coercion is when you like forcing the participant to by a direct or indirect way to participate, like I'm gonna give you money or stuff like this. This is an overt, implicit threat of harm made to obtain a compliance, like threatening to withhold the treatment to participant who would otherwise be entitled to unless they participate in the trial. Like I'm gonna tell my patient, I'm not gonna continue with you, or I may not refer you to any doctor if you didn't join this trial. This is called coercion. Undue influence is the offer of an appropriate reward to obtain compliance. I'm gonna give you $1,000 if you participate with me. This is like undue influence. They're gonna participate because of the money, not because they wanted to participate. And this is should be judged like it depends on the current situation. Like a $10 compensation for participating in 1 hour survey would not be considered undue in high income country. Like this is not a big deal. It's just $10. You're gonna buy like 2 cups of coffee. But in low income countries, this $10 is like equivalent to month salary. So this is still called undue influence. Okay. So coercion is like threat or harm. Undue influence is like inappropriate reward. Okay. The process of obtaining informed consent is formalized by the participant signing an informed consent form for the research that has been approved first by the IRB. Okay, So first thing, if you wanted to conduct a primary research, you have to write a proposal form and get the acceptance of the institutional review board. Then you are going to recruit the subjects and make the whole process of like informing them of everything. And the process of obtaining informed consent is not finalized upon formal enrollment and the signing of informed consent of research form, but instead it extends for the entire duration of the trial. It is not just like a form they're gonna sign at first, but for any step I'm going to do in between, I have to explain everything and what I'm doing. Study participants should be updated on information relevant to them throughout the duration of the trial or study. Participants have the right to withdraw consent of research at any time. Okay? Okay, let's move on to research funding. This is not with the participants, but for me as a physician. Before accepting funding for research, the research should contractually ensure that the research sponsor cannot influence or delay or obstruct the publication of the finding. Like if a medical company, they are publishing a new drug and they're gonna give me like a lot of money to boost the efficacy of this drug falsely. And if I prove that this drug is not like that efficient, they can obstruct the publication of the findings. No, I need to make sure of the sponsors that I'm dealing with. Physicians should not accept any form of compensation for directing patients to participate in research study. Like, hey, doctor, you are going to recruit some patients, and we're gonna give you like $50 for each patient you're gonna recruit. This is not acceptable. The source of funding should be disclosed as a part of informed consent for the institutional review board and for the participants, and when you are publishing the research findings. Okay. Researchers should refuse to accept financial compensation that surpass the value of their input in the research and doesn't align with the current market rate. Like the medical company, okay, I'm gonna support you with the materials that you're going to need, and I'm gonna write this when I'm going to publish the paper, but they are not going to give me a car for publishing the efficacy of their drug. So the any financial compensation, not only in research, but even for my patient, should be like a minimum, like financial compensation or a minimum gift. Okay. Okay, let's talk about the same concept, which is funding, but for the participants. Compensation for enrolled participants. The type and the amount of compensation should be determined prior to the study enrollment and should be just fair for all participants. Like I'm gonna give you like $10 or something that is doesn't worth that much their value. This is just a compensation for their effort. Prorated compensation. Participants receive a predetermined compensation for the completion of each trial activity, like visit or procedure, or compensation that scales up with the duration of enrollment. Okay. Completion contingent compensation. What is the definition of completion contingent compensation? Like I'm gonna give you your reward when you finish the whole trial with me. This is not acceptable because the patient like would have withdraw from the paper or from the trial, but they want to do that because they need to continue until the end to get the benefit. So this is not acceptable. You should like prorate it and predetermined before it, and the amount of compensation should be adequate in relation to the risk and time and inconveniences demanded by the study participants, but should not be excessive or tied to any condition that may affect voluntary consent and thereby constitute coercion or undue influence. This is two important concepts that shows up particularly for step 2 and step 3. The participant can withdraw at any time without the loss of benefit to which the participant is otherwise entitled. If the participant experiences adverse effect as a result of a study participation, the participant is eligible for financial support or medical treatment and may be eligible for additional compensation. And this should be said from the first point at their informed consent. Okay? Research on vulnerable population, like infants, like minors. Vulnerable, who are the vulnerable population? A population that has insufficient ability to protect or advocate for their interest. In addition to the requirements of obtaining informed consent from study participants, Special protections exist for vulnerable population in research. The policy on protection of vulnerable population is regulated under something called OHRB, which is Office for Human Research Protection. Office for Human Research Protection. They are regularity and like ethically checks are enforced to ensure the protection of population that are at increased risk of harm in clinical trials. Applications and proposals must fulfill the OHRB requirements in order to receive federal department or agency support. Pregnant individuals and fetuses, they are considered vulnerable participants, and of my research should be permitted. As I told you last time, I cannot conduct a research to see either breast milk is beneficial, like breastfeeding is beneficial or not, because it is already established. I cannot conduct a research to make sure that should I give vitamin K or not. I already established that if I didn't give vitamin K, the patient may suffer like from severe hemorrhage. So clinical trials or research studies on pregnant individuals and fetuses must fulfill the following requirements. Like preclinical studies involving pregnant animals and the clinical studies involving non-pregnant individual has been conducted prior to this research question. I should have adequate data regarding the potential risks of pregnant individuals and fetuses available. The clinical trial has the potential to directly benefit the pregnant individual and or their fetuses, like risk-benefit ratio. There are no other means of answering the research question, and the research poses a minimal risk for the pregnant individual or fetus. So the requirement is the investigator may not have any role in determining the viability of the fetus. No incentive may be offered to terminate a pregnancy. I cannot like give money to terminate this pregnancy. If the research is only beneficial to the fetus, parental consent must be obtained unless the father is unavailable, temporarily incapacitated, or the pregnancy resulted from a rape or incest. Okay? Neonates, permitted research, clinical trials, or research studies must fulfill that the research question is crucial and cannot be answered by any other means. Same requirements for pregnant and fetuses, and provide a direct benefit to the subject. Okay? For neonates of uncertain viability, I don't know like if they are viable or not, the research must increase the probability of survival. If it may increase the probability of making these fetuses non-viable, I shouldn't do it. Non-viable neonates may be involved in research only if vital function are not artificially maintained, like they are not on like under cardiac support, and the heartbeat and respiration will not be terminated by the research. Same concept for the viable. I shouldn't increase the probability of their non-viability or like lead them to death, right? Legally effective informed consent must be obtained from their parents, guardians, or legally authorized representative, like the court order that we said, or the child protective services. But this is for neonates, so it is not, I think, under the effect of a child protective CBS. Children, the permitted research clinical trials that pose no greater risk of harm to children than to adults, and pose no other ethical reasons for the exclusion of children. If the intervention being tested poses a greater risk of harm to children than adults, the trial may not be conducted. If the research question cannot be answered by any other means, or the research has a direct benefit to the subject. Same two requirements that we already established on pregnant fetuses and neonates. Investigators must obtain assent from the child as well as informed consent from the parents. This shows up in exams. They are gonna tell you like what is the next step of management. Even if the child agreed, I need to get an informed consent from the parent or the guardian or the court order. Prison inmates, the research investigates health issues directly related to prison inmate population, like research on mental effects of incarceration or research related to viral hepatitis or prisons or like tuberculosis. The requirement is that the risk to be greater for prisoners than for non-prison volunteers was more than a minimum risk, be an inconvenience to the subjects. Okay? At least one member of the IRB that reviews the ethical validity of the study should be a prison inmate or a representative. This is not important for the USMLE exams, but just for completeness sake. None of the non-prisoner members of the IRB may have any affiliation with the prison. Any potential advantages offered to the prison inmates through participation in research may not be so great that they affect the prison inmate ability to weigh the risk of participating against the benefit. For example, prison inmates must not be coerced into participation. They already should be under voluntary participation by being offered the potential benefit. Like I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna mitigate or I'm gonna take you out of the prison if you participate with me. Would be unethical. Okay. Same concept for coercion and undue influence. In research, special protections exist for vulnerable population because prison inmates are considered vulnerable population. Okay. Let's think today participant data protection. I need to get the HIPAA privacy rule, which establishes guidelines for protecting participant data. Any data that individually identifiable health information need to be protected, something we call HCPI or human identifiable health information in general. If I need to use this data, I need to get one of three things: participant authorization. I'm gonna use your data or waiver from the IRB or privacy board, and only of health information of deceased individual is used or disclosed. Okay. For example, if I did my research and the trial is completed and I need to use some of the data to make a new research. If I got a waiver from the IRB, it's okay as long as I'm not like publishing individual identifiable health information. Like a medical student can do this. Okay. Participation, a participant withdrawal from research. A participant can withdraw from a study at any time without penalty or loss of benefit to which participant otherwise entitled or obligation to explain the decision. You can leave at any time, no question asked. Okay. If a participant wishes to terminate their participation, researchers may inquire if they are willing to share their reasons, like for my own information, but they are under no obligation to explain the decision. Inquiring about the reason like may help for the safety of other participants. Like it give me like GI upset. Okay, it's okay, you can leave, and I need that information for myself. Withdrawal from the trial must be documented, and already collected data relating to the participant may be kept and analyzed for my own research, but like I'm not gonna use any individual identifiable health information. Data collected for research conducted under the FDA regulation may not be destroyed or omitted from the analysis. And the participant will be also knowing this. So today we already now finished the capacity, content, competence, and consent. And we already discussed all the information of research ethics in general. Thank you, Miki. And see you next time on further discussions. I hope you benefit. This meeting is recorded and will be published at Midlex online. And see you all next time. Bye bye. Have a great day.